Meghan's holiday photo dump this week managed something rare. It turned a walk to Diana's grave into a content moment and recreated one of Diana's most famous photographs almost frame for frame in the very same carousel. But that is only where today starts because we also got a fresh rumor swirling about Harry's love life with suspiciously convenient timing. A fight breaking out online over whether King Charles went soft, letting the Harkles back into the building at all. A king and queen actually representing the country on a world stage, and Princess Anne quietly making everyone else in the family look lazy. Welcome back, my Royal Rogues. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the Royal Rogue. Let's get down to it. So let's start with Meghan because her family's summer holiday album this week reopened an old wound and staged a new photo shoot in the very same set of pictures. The carousel went up on her Instagram 12 photos deep, and two of them did all the work. One showed the children walking a tree-lined avenue at what royal watchers immediately identified as Althorpe, Diana's family estate. One child visibly carrying flowers toward what can only be their late grandmother's grave. So a few slides later came a very different image. Meghan on a beach in a dark backless swimsuit, cap on, hand on hip, looking out of the water. So anyone who remembers the famous 1997 photograph of Diana walking a beach in Saint-Tropez, black swimsuit, sunglasses on, alone with her thoughts, did not need a caption to clock what that second photo was doing. So the reaction online did not hold back. Commentary called the grave photo ghoulish, accused the family of turning a private, solemn moment into a PR opportunity, and landed hardest on the obvious contradiction. This is a couple that has spent years accusing the tabloids and the firm of exploiting their privacy, and now releasing a composed style image of two children carrying flowers toward their grandmother's resting place for an audience in the millions. It's worth remembering that back in 2016, Harry stood in front of a camera and complained, in effect, about the constant, exhausting intrusion into his private life, insisting that some things simply have to stay private. Almost a decade later, it's his own wife deciding exactly which private family moments get an audience and exactly how large that audience gets. So nobody forced this carousel online. Nobody leaked it from a long lash across a hatch. It went up on her own account, under her own name, on her own schedule, which makes the outrage of her privacy defense a much harder sell than it used to be. And then there's Charles Spencer, who has spent years insisting that no photographs and no press would ever be allowed anywhere near his sister's grave. But the moment this carousel went up, plenty of long-time royal watchers online said, in effect, that they didn't buy the scene was as spontaneous as it looked, or that Spencer had actually held that line this time around either. And for the beach photo, calling it a tribute would be generous. Calling it a recreation gets a lot closer to the truth, right down to the pose and the styling. Diana never got any say in how her image got reused after 1997. Methane picked the beach, picked the swimsuit, picked the exact stance, and posted it herself to her own millions of followers on her own timeline on her own schedule. Yeah, some homages are about honoring a memory. Others are about borrowing one and hoping nobody clocks the difference. And speaking of image management working overtime, because there's a fresh rumor about Harry's love life doing the rounds this week, and the timing on it is almost too convenient. Word going around from people claiming inside knowledge is that Harry has met someone new based somewhere near Montecito, and that Meghan found out after discovering messages on his phone and is said to be livid about it. So treat all of that exactly the way it deserves to be treated. An anonymous claim from an anonymous source with nothing solid behind it, so weigh it accordingly. But the timing is interesting. Just under 1 week ago, Harry sat down for a podcast conversation with a retired England rugby international recorded during his UK visit and released to help promote next year's Invictus Games. By most accounts, it did not land the way his team hoped. He described his own title in a jokey way that amounted to calling himself the Prince of England, walked through his fairly basic and disgusting grooming routine on air, and leaned hard into laddish, blokey humor that landed for some listeners and made plenty of others online wince. So less than 2 weeks after an appearance that had people online quietly asking whether Harry was trying a little too hard to prove he's still one of the lads, a new rumor lands suggesting he's found himself a fresh romantic interest elsewhere. Yeah, score 1 for remarkable timing, or score 1 for a publicity engine that knows exactly which story to release right after a wobble like that one. So I am not saying anybody planted this. I'm saying if I were advising Team Sausages the morning after that podcast dropped, this is roughly the story I'd suggest leaking next. So whatever the truth of it, Meghan's camp has said nothing. Harry's side has said nothing either. And the only people talking are sources nobody can verify or trace back to anyone real. So that is usually a sign a story is either invented outright or being carefully managed by somebody who very much wants it circulating. Either way, the fact that this particular rumor found an instant, eager audience says plenty about where the public sits on that marriage right now, whether or not a single word of it ever turns out to be true. Gingerbread clearly still knows how to generate a headline. So whether he actually needed a new one this week is the more interesting question. But speaking of headlines nobody asked for, because the online argument over whether King Charles went soft, letting Harry and Meghan back into a room at all, is still raging days later. Ever since word got out that the king reportedly handed his son something close to a genuine last-chance warning behind closed doors at Highgrove, a chunk of the commentary online has swung the other way entirely, accusing Charles of weakness for granting any audience whatsoever. But here's the problem with that argument. It hands Team Sausages exactly the narrative they were hoping for. Every post insisting the king folded is a post treating an hour-long private meeting with no photographs released, no statement issued, and reportedly some pretty stern terms attached, as some kind of victory for the other side. It wasn't. Nothing about how that meeting was handled looks like capitulation. There was no portrait, no statement, no fanfare. Just a father quietly managing a relationship he clearly does not yet fully trust, entirely on his own terms and his own timing, while Buckingham Palace controlled every single detail of what the public actually got to see. So if Meghan's side is hoping that a careful, closely guarded audience comes across as some soft opening toward an eventual return, this week's reaction online suggests plenty of people simply are not buying it. There's a real difference between a king being a father to a son he is still worried about, and a king rolling out any kind of welcome mat, and nothing about the terms reportedly attached to that meeting looks like the second thing. So meanwhile, the same corners of the internet insisting Charles caved are the same ones who spent the last 4 years insisting the firm would never budge an inch. They cannot both be true, and only one of them actually fits what's happened since. So the people calling this a win for Meghan are, in effect, doing her publicity for her, free of charge. The people calling Charles weak for privately seeing his own son with apparently zero concessions offered in return might want to check exactly what changed as a result of it. As far as anyone outside that room can tell, the honest answer is nothing at all. So a private meeting is not a policy change, and a father's worry is not the same thing as an institution softening its position until somebody produces an actual photograph, an actual statement, or an actual invitation to something bigger than a coffee behind closed doors. The honest takeaway is that nothing has moved, no matter how badly one side of this story wants it to look otherwise. But from a story about who is or isn't welcome back in the building to a story about a king simply doing the job he was born into, yesterday, King Charles and Queen Camilla formally opened the Commonwealth Games at the Hydro in Glasgow, the king presiding in his role as patron of Commonwealth sport. It is the kind of engagement that never manufactures a single controversial headline and never needs to. Athletes from across the Commonwealth, a global broadcast audience, and a monarch doing the actual, unglamorous work of representing the country on a truly international stage. So set that next to a family across the Atlantic still trying to squeeze content out of a visit to a grave, and the gap in what using your platform is actually supposed to mean becomes obvious without anyone needing to spell it out. So this is the second major international sporting event Charles has formally opened within the space of a year, all while managing a public cancer diagnosis with a level of composure that would be remarkable in anyone, let alone a head of a state, whose every appearance gets picked apart. And Camilla, as always, was right there beside him doing the quieter work of standing through hours of formal proceedings without a single complaint ever reaching the press. Glasgow last hosted these games back in 2014, handing the king the honor the opening them again this time says something about how thoroughly the city and the wider Commonwealth still trust the institution to show up when it actually matters. But nobody needs a body language breakdown on this one. It's simply duty carried out the old-fashioned way on a Thursday in Glasgow in front of a proper global audience with zero hashtag campaign required to make any of it matter. And finally, to the reigning queen of simply showing up because Princess Anne is doing exactly what Princess Anne always does, quietly work in circles around the rest of the family without asking anyone for credit. The Sunday Times published a profile on the Princess Royal this week, timed to her milestone 75th birthday next month, and buried inside it was one small telling detail, allegedly. People close to Anne reportedly say that she'd love to see her nephew William pick up more of the unglamorous bread-and-butter royal engagements, the investitures and hospital visits that never trend, so she isn't always the one left holding that end of the workload. Yeah, grain of salt, of course. But William, for his part, reportedly holds nothing but admiration for his aunt's work ethic and has said as much himself, describing just how relentless she's always been. So call it gentle family ribbing rather than any kind of feud. The sort of good-natured needling that happens in every family with one relative who simply refuses to slow down no matter what. Because Anne has topped the list of hardest working royals for years running, and by every account she's approaching 75 with absolutely no interest in easing off. This is a woman who has spent decades quietly outworking royals half her age, who colleagues still describe as the family's most reliable pair of hands, and who by every measure available would rather be doing the actual job than talking about having done it. So if there is a lesson buried anywhere in that Sunday Times profile, it's this one. The family member with the least interest in managing her own image somehow ended up with the strongest one anyway. Certain other relatives might want to sit with that for a while. But here's today's through line. Every single Harkles story this week came with the exact same gap between the image and the reality. A grave visit staged as content, a rumor with suspiciously good timing, and a private audience getting spun into a headline it never actually earned. Meanwhile, the two stories that had nothing to do with managing anyone's image were the two that looked completely effortless. A king opening a global event and a princess quietly doing the job nobody else particularly wants. I don't think that rumor about Harry survives the wake without at least one denial, and I don't think the argument over whether Charles went too soft survives contact with that actually did or didn't change. So let me know what you think about this in the comments. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the Royal Rogue. Much love and bliss.